Okay, welcome viewers to the series Exploring Technology, Careers in Technology's New Frontiers. This episode is the developments and directions for AI and robotics. My name is Charlotte Gray. I'm a senior at Middlebury College, and I would like to introduce this episode's guest speaker.
Thank you very much. My name is Bryan Rich. I graduated from Middlebury in 1987. I was a February freshman. I'm currently a managing director at Accenture Federal Services, and I lead the AI applied intelligence business.
Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to start off with asking a couple questions about what you do. Working at Accenture, which is a consulting firm. I know that you work with federal consulting, and I also know that technology consulting is a different type of consulting than some people might have experience with. Could you talk a little bit about what specifically Accenture does and what you do at Accenture?
Sure. So, I mean, Accenture is a large global consulting firm. We're, I think, more and more considered a technology company, and the federal business is specifically geared towards supporting the federal government, agencies within the federal government, and primarily around, more and more digital transformation and the integration of things like RPA, artificial intelligence, machine learning, into how the government is rethinking how they're supporting citizens, agencies like the IRS, the Department of Education, how they process loans. We're deep into many parts of the federal government in terms of how they're using data science, computer science, technology, to kind of rethink and reimagine kind of how government can work.
That's cool. So your specific role at Accenture is with AI and robotics. What specifically does your team do as that helps with the federal government?
So I joined Accenture about 2 years ago, and I'd previously been in a series of startup companies, primarily focused on data science. And the goal really was to consolidate all of the advanced analytics, data science, machine learning, AI, robotic process automation into a single kind of business group. So I founded something called Applied Intelligence within Accenture Federal. So I'm kind of like a business within a business. We were about 200 people in September of 2018. We're currently 700 people. So there's just been amazing growth in the space over the last 2 years. A lot of that driven by kind of the government's shift to the cloud and moving away from trying to manage technology and applications on premise and taking advantage of all the compute and cloud computing available, if you digitize in the cloud. So we're a large business within federal, probably around 15,000 employees. But more and more we're seeing, the entire convergence between consulting, technology, and data. It's just been a tremendous accelerated convergence as the technology gets better and cheaper.
So who would you be interacting with most on a daily basis? Are you usually coming into solving a problem specifically for the government that they've called you into, or are you working on generating solutions to possible problems, tools that would make technology easier to use for people within governments, and then presenting that to them? And who's in general filling up this team of people that you're leading? Is this people that do computer science, or is this people that do marketing?
I mean, talent is a huge, having the right people makes all the difference. So a big part of my focus has been on hiring almost a new generation of consulting expertise, more and more technically driven and proficient, more and more focus on mathematics, the ability to generate models, understand kind of advanced data science solutions to specific problems. And then within the AI space, the whole emergence of labeling and training data. We have kind of 3 ways we go to market. One is we respond to proposals, right? So the government will put out a huge RFP. Some of them are, upwards of $500 million, and they take, anywhere from 3 to 6 months to kind of respond to. We have existing customer relationships where we kind of understand what the customer is looking for. We understand their budgetary constraints and the constraints they have maybe within their own capacity in terms of their workforce. So we're continuously looking for ways to kind of optimize the value we're delivering to the government as we kind of partner with them to solve problems. And I think within that framework, the most kind of the three things everybody's dealing with is what I call the 3 V's: volume, velocity, and variety of data. It's just government agencies are overwhelmed with the volume of data that's being collected, especially as you think about edge devices and IoT and 5G and how that's driving just an incredible proliferation in the volume of data. The data is coming at the government faster than ever before, right? So the velocity of the data, just driven by the fact that they're in the cloud, they're networked, they're pulling in low latency data sources from hundreds of channels. And then the variety of data is changing, right? It's not just text. We're talking about audio, video. So you're getting into things like language science, computer vision, and all of that requires artificial intelligence and machine learning to really be able to profit from that data. So there's just, all of this stuff is happening at once. And I think, it's been exciting and rewarding for me, almost kind of near the end of my career, to see kind of the government embrace this whole convergence, right, as a way to significantly improve the speed and quality of the services they can provide to citizens. And that's everything from reducing backlog for veterans to, improving the timeliness of mail delivery, the ability to reduce traffic. I mean, they're just massive variety of problems that the government is trying to use technology and data to solve.
That's super interesting. One of the things that I always wonder about as a person who's very excited about data myself, I always think about the data ethics and how when I sign up for a subscription service or I purchase something and I agree to the terms and conditions, I personally usually know what I'm getting into because I don't, even if I don't read through it, I'm aware of how data is used because I am personally a person that uses data as a computer science major. But a lot of people, when they sign those things off, aren't necessarily sure what they're getting into. And so informed consent as a factor of data usage is, I think, a big player in data ethics. Obviously, as a part of a private company that works for the government, you guys must have a lot of, if not training, then opinions, at least from you, on data ethics and how that's moving in this world. I know that a lot of the government laws about data aren't able to get passed fast enough to keep up with the technology that's keeping track of that data. So is there an interesting relationship between the government and the data that they're using, or are there rules about what you guys are and aren't allowed to use? Or in general, what's your take on data ethics?
Yeah, so it's a very important observation. So I think there are two really important areas. One is what we call client data protection. It's really the governance and the management of the government's data. And in some cases, that's the data of US citizens. So there's an incredible amount of regulation, compliance, and protocol around being able to put your hands on data. And there's just all kinds of protections and compliance requirements. The second part of it is really, I think, where you were starting around the ethics, right, of the usage of that data and the quality and precision of models being used to generate recommendations from the data that the government has, which we call ethical AI. And Accenture has been kind of a leader in the whole, at least within industry, around the ethical use of AI and machine learning, because you're essentially trying to train machines to make decisions that humans would normally do, but they're able to do it at a scale and a velocity that would cost way too much money if you were trying to do it with humans. And I think if the data is trained properly and labeled properly, you're in good shape. But as we've all seen with things like sometimes the models are biased or deliver imprecise outcomes. And so a lot of what we work on is, I have a whole team of people who work on the reliability and accuracy of the models we're building. So there's both the dimension of the privacy, how we manage with the government their data. And the second is really the ethics around the introduction of machine learning and AI into the decision-making process for government. And this is, I think, if you've noticed in the last 2 years, there's a whole new field of executive within the federal government called CDO, Chief Data Officer. Their responsibility really is to make sure that within each of their agencies that they are overseeing the governance of the data, which isn't easy, right? Because the networks are connected, people have access to the data. So, and we've all seen some of the breaches through cyber attacks recently. So, it's a complicated framework, but the government takes their data privacy, their data and the privacy of the data of citizens extremely seriously.
That's understandable, yeah. So when you mentioned that you have like a whole section of your team that's kind of set aside for that. In general, I know you said there's a lot more like mathematically inclined people that are supporting you on your team. Who are the people that are on your team that you would see like on a day-to-day? Like what does an average day for you kind of look like in your position? Obviously with the pandemic, it probably looks a lot like sitting in front of your computer with Zoom meetings, but in general, how would those people be supporting you in your specific role?
Yeah, so I have a leadership team. So I have experts in computer vision, machine learning, data engineering, data science, primarily platform. And they essentially comprise my leadership team. We've hired specifically around the data problem, I think 40 PhDs in the last 20 months. Carnegie Mellon, Johns Hopkins, MIT. There's just tremendous talent coming out of universities now, especially at the doctorate level. And there's, as there's lots of different kinds of data science and lots of different kinds of AI, right? So you need specialists for different subsets: computer vision, natural language processing, natural language understanding. Even within just data science itself, they're kind of different religions within data science. And so you need to have a very diverse, multi-dimensional team of people, because the variety of problems we're trying to solve at scale are just tremendous, right? And so last week we won a contract, and this is public, for IARPA, using computer vision to process satellite imagery to predict the impact of climate change on the atmosphere, right? And so we're having to figure out how are we going to label and train massive amounts of satellite imagery, right? And then all the telemetry coming off their sensors have to be factored in, which is a huge math problem. And then, it's just very cool stuff, but to do it at scale, you really need a pretty large team of people. So personally, I have about 10 direct people reporting to me. But I think that what everybody's seeing is this shift away from hierarchical organizations anyway. So I run a very flat, connected, networked organization. I speak frequently with people throughout my part of the business, continuously reaching into projects to get an idea of how people feel about their work they're doing. Core values are important, integrity, the urgency that we feel. We're working for the federal government, so we need people who care about the mission that they're involved in. It's not just showing up and filling out your timesheet. And then mastery is really important, because we're hiring people, but the tools and the technology is shifting so quickly that even if you're really good at something, you need to be continuously kind of updating your knowledge and skills. So we invest a lot of time and money in training and upskilling our team. And so, it's great because I get to work with, amazing people, but it is structured in a way so that we can scale, which means, I don't have 100 people reporting to me on a daily basis. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to function.
Yeah, exactly. No, scalability is a huge theme, and all of the stuff that I've been looking at for computer science, that seems to be a running problem, that just the more you have, it's not necessarily linear, the amount of time things are going to take. So making sure that stuff is organized in the correct way for that is really.
Yeah, and small mistakes, even, you can put together a great canned solution that looks great.
Mhm.
But when you go to scale it, that little 0.01% of imprecision at a billion, becomes a 5% mistake. And
Right.
so, everybody's learning at the same time. I mean, I tell my CEO this all the time, like, we've never done this before. The government's never done this before. So, we approach it with a very kind of open intellectual curiosity, but we have great partners. We're a large business, so we work closely with Amazon, Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA. I mean, we're very well positioned as a business to draw upon the talent of our partners.
Right.
And so it's not just what we can do. There's an ecosystem uh, of team members on any of these large scale deployments. And so we're constantly working with their engineers and their experts to kind of cross pollinate, cross train, collaborate.
What another question, what is one of the biggest challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis, and what's one of the biggest challenges that you're foreseeing impacting your specific field, so this technology, federal consulting, with respect to like
Right.
artificial intelligence? What are the big
So I
challenges?
think there are two fundamental challenges that, I mean, as like a person leading this business, talent is just, the competition for talent is fierce, right? The US was not ready for the pace of demand for expertise in these areas. And so I think you're seeing a tremendous shift in in education towards STEM, math, science, all that stuff. So that's good. And then even within that, we're very focused on diversity. So finding talent, that's equal in gender, ethnicity, it's just very hard. It's going to take a little while until, I think the labor force catches up to the opportunity that exists. And so talent is a huge challenge for me, to find people who are really expert in computer vision, not just proficient, but
Right.
who are technically excellent, right, at working with customers. And I would say there's a challenge within that framework, which is finding technical talent who can communicate effectively with government executives is also, so there's kind of a weird reason why I'm in this job without any technical background.
Mhm.
So it's about communication, the ability to really break down the problem. Some of that is more of a liberal arts, the ability to listen and understand and then translate those requirements, working with a team. And, really the translator is like a critical role within the consulting model
For sure.
around technical solutions. So talent is really a constant churn, right? We're looking for people all the time. I'm hiring continuously. And that's one area. The second is the pace of change is very fast, right? So even what we were talking about delivering a year ago and how we were going to deliver it on Amazon, now we're realizing, well, native services on Google might be better, or Azure may have done something that's interesting around healthcare. And so you really have to be, super attentive to understanding what's going on in industry, so that you're able to kind of leverage the investments of all those ecosystem partners to deliver better solutions, right? Because you're competing with other companies. And so you can't just be static and an expert in AWS. I mean, you need AWS engineers who are expert in AWS, but as a leader, I need to be absolutely sure that I have the best understanding of the native services available through different partners,
Right.
to
And
be
if there's
able
something,
to
sorry, go ahead.
understand. And so I think, that, and I call that mastery. Mastery is a constant challenge for me, for my team, for even the people that, graduated in with as experts in computer vision 2 years ago.
Right.
The available models are shifting and the technology is shifting. One of the things I've done is start an applied and basic research lab within my business.
Mhm.
And so we have standing infrastructure. We have standing infrastructure that is up to government specifications for government data protection.
Right.
And so we are iterating, prototyping, testing, and evaluating continuously within that team. And I think we've published, 35 peer-reviewed papers this year. So we're very active in terms of like publishing and doing actual scientific research, which is how we won the IARPA project.
Mhm.
and we're doing a lot around, COVID is a great example. I immediately invested in looking at how to obtain reliable data from areas where there's disparate data sources, right? The US does not have a uniformly granular understanding of our population at the county
Absolutely
level.
not. Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
data disparity right out of the box was a big problem around COVID transmission and R naught. And so we wrote 3 papers on it. We executed a pretty sophisticated data modeling. We plugged into about 60 APIs, including Hopkins, and started to really, we saw massive differences in what we were being told were the transmission and progression projections versus what we were actually able to more accurately identify, which creates a political problem when you're working with a federal agency, right? You've got one set of data with one set of models, and then you've got
With
different data and
another
different
one,
models, right? And so
right?
it becomes very complicated. But the point is, I'm investing in scientific research just so that we can test and evaluate, the best solutions for our customers. And that process in and of itself helps upskill everybody, right? So there's a multiplier effect of that investment.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I definitely, it seems like constant creativity or constant curiosity is a base level requirement to be where you are in your field. It seems like everything's just moving so fast that if you're not
Yes.
constantly reading up on the new technologies and, excited yourself personally to find out what people are doing with AWS or with different like server platforms and things like that, if you're not actually excited about learning that, then you might not learn it. And you wouldn't be able to suggest it next time it comes up in a meeting when everyone says, oh, let's use AWS. And then you have to be able to say, oh, wait, actually, I heard about this new one. So that seems like
Well, and
always.
also filtering out, because a lot of technology companies make claims, right,
Mhm.
that they've got things, and we have to vet everything we bring forward to customers. Otherwise, we get into situations where, we start assuming a tremendous amount of technical debt. The government's gotten very smart about procuring advanced data science and technology solutions. They've moved away from kind of these big, they have big contracts, but they will issue challenges, for example.
Right.
And so they'll, issue a very difficult challenge. You've got 6 weeks to solve this problem. Give it to us in a Docker container. And then we have to be able to click a button, open it, it has to run. And then you're going to spend 6 hours here in orals with the people who put the solution together, and will come and work for us if we award the work to you. You can't like switch the talent out.
Right.
And so it's become a very exciting, way to do business with the government, because we have to be on our A game all the time, and we have to be ready for these challenges to come out. Some of them we did one 6 months ago for $300 million, and we won, but that's 5 people working for 6 weeks,
Mhm.
and then standing up in front of the customer explaining why they chose different technology, data science approaches, and then committing to them that if we're awarded the work, that the 5 people in the room, my star athletes, will go and play on their field.
And I mean,
It's a
it seems like,
very interesting and new way for the government to do business, because they're getting smarter about buying things that look good as a prototype but don't scale.
right. And I mean, it obviously, those people could be really, really brilliant, but if they're not able to actually communicate it actually is that they did in a way that people that aren't necessarily technologically up to speed with the latest things, those people might not understand what it is really that they're doing if they're not communicating it in a way that's clear. Like if they didn't make
We
it
practice
clear
a
in
lot.
yeah, exactly. It seems like
We have coaches for that.
it seems like a thing that like being able to know how to phrase your questions and how to phrase your answers and how to like hear people's questions specifically, which is I guess a weird way of phrasing that, but that's how I've always seen it, is being able to understand what it is people are actually asking you. Seems like a big like key skill, and I think that that's probably why like the liberal arts situation is like a helpful one to come into this sort of field with. To that, if you
Okay.
have any like what skill sets are important to have, we've obviously talked about like creativity and adaptability and curiosity. What type of experiences, if you're talking to maybe a Middlebury student who is like thinking about what they might want to do for their career. Obviously, you're walking evidence of the fact that what you do right when you get out of college could be completely different from what you end up doing as like
Mhm.
the rest of your career. But if you, as a person who makes the hiring decisions often, what's stuff that you look for that you think makes people more informed on the subject that they're like applying for, or the role they're applying for, or things that, you know, when you see someone that has this on their resume, this person must really be interested in this because this is like a marker of someone who's really passionate about it. So like internships or research or things like that, like what's stuff that sticks out to you? What could you recommend to Middlebury
So I'd
students?
say, I mean, first of all, don't be bullied into conformity, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of pressure when, you know, you've spent tons of money on your education to graduate and immediately be like, okay, I need to get on the treadmill and start. You know, I think it's really important to acquire skills. You're going to learn the same, potentially even better work ethics as a carpenter, right?
Mhm. Right.
Than you will interning in something that you already know a little bit about. I think it's important to like stretch yourself by doing things that may seem maybe non-intuitive and non-connected. But when I graduated, I just wanted to like clear my brain and use my body and, you know, do something physically challenging. But
Mhm.
in doing that, like working on a crab boat requires an insane amount of like just focus for
Yeah.
safety,
Yeah.
stamina, physical stamina for work, and adaptation because you're constantly dealing with conditions that are changing and often, you know, a little bit dangerous.
Mhm.
And so like looking back at like that was one of the best experiences for what I'm doing currently, right? It just you get this alertness that is critical to survival if you're working in a crab boat, but it helps you kind of understand what's going on around you, and that situational awareness is great no matter what you're doing. So I'm not saying you can't get it and you can't get trained, you know, in it, but I think it's a much more fun and adventurous way
Absolutely.
to obtain that skill.
Yeah.
And it's not that, it could be anything. It could be working in a national park or but
Mhm.
things that are just, you know, where the urgency and the physical demands and the stamina are just so intense. It creates like it just gives you um, tremendous resilience, which is very important, right? Especially if you're going to pursue a highly competitive, if you're going to be an entrepreneur or data scientist. I mean, it just takes trial and error all the time. I mean, some people, you know, maybe it comes easily,
Mhm.
but I really look for people who, to your point, they've had maybe a more elliptical path. They didn't necessarily go from A to B and just get their PhD and then come out and they're ready to work. You know, I look for people, you know, one guy I hired was manager of a minor league baseball team, right? I was like, that's awesome. You're going to be a great leader of people.
Yeah.
I've hired many soldiers because, you know, they've been in situations probably a lot more dangerous than crab fishing, but it's some of the same, you know, ability to collaborate under pressure,
Mhm.
physical stamina, focus, you know, those are things that are really important. They're not necessarily technical,
Mhm.
but they're dimensions to, you know, what I call star athletes. You know, they all seem to have these specific characteristics. Um, I would say relationships are the most critical thing. The ability to build relationships, even over long periods of time, maintain them. You know, your network of people is critical. Like if I need to find someone now, like a specific kind of person, you know,
Mhm.
I have a network of people that I've been working with, collaborating with, staying in touch with,
Mhm.
you know, for years. And the ability to like kind of build that trust and maintain it, even though sometimes you're competing against each other at different companies. You know, sometimes your lives become very different,
Mhm.
but you know, relationships is a critical feature of success. You can't do anything alone. Like it's just impossible.
Yeah.
And then the third, I think, is like responsiveness. You have to be responsive. It doesn't matter what job you're in. You know, if someone asks you to do something or you're working with a colleague or you want to collaborate, if you're not responsive, you're a terrible collaborator. And if you're a
Mhm.
terrible collaborator, you're not going to be able to build kind of a brand within the world in which you're working and competing. You want people to rely on you and to be able to trust you. And a lot
Absolutely.
of that is about how responsive you are and the quality of the work you do. So, you know, investing yourself heavily in those three areas for me, I mean, I didn't start out thinking about these things, but as I look back, I would say those are, kind of, and then there's a lot of luck and there's a normal, like, I met a guy, or a
Yeah.
woman. And so, but I think you can increase the statistical probability of good fortune
Okay. If you go work on
by,
it.
so it's not, I mean, things are never an accident. So all you really need to do is behave in a way that will statistically increase the probability of something good happening.
That's perfectly concise. Yeah, that's the spot on way of saying it.
Many of the people I work with, they've been at the same firm since they graduated from college.
Wow.
And so I'm super respectful of how, evolved they are as practitioners, but
Mhm.
I see a big difference in, people have had a variety of experiences who've, gone outside of their comfort zone continuously, who've had to work their way through school, doing other things. And so, I look for candidates that just have, a wide range of experiences, because frankly, that's much more fun to talk about in interviews than like, what did you write your thesis on? I mean, that's interesting, but
Yeah.
I'm really interested in people. And I think that's important because you want to put together an interesting community of people. You don't want to just hire, this same shaped person.
Mhm.
And I think, it's not just about diversity and inclusion and, all the, the
But
really important, talent acquisition principles. It has to be a fun, interesting place to work. So you need fun, interesting people. And I've got data scientists who can't look you in the eye, right? They're so shy,
yeah,
they're so awkward, right? But they're the best at what they do. And, you need to create an atmosphere where people like that, feel like cool,
Mhm.
because they are cool, right?
Cool. Yeah.
So, I'm really excited about what I'm doing. I'm happy to talk to anybody about it. If you want to talk more, I'm happy to. No, that's good. I think, Accenture is a fantastic company.
Yeah.
Conversely, coming out of college and coming to a place like Accenture gives you some pretty interesting perspective on, what corporate culture is like. And I think it prepares you to do just about anything, because our focus on delivery and collaboration and the diversity and community that, I mean, I'm like amazed. Like, I always was afraid to come, not afraid, I was always um, uh, rejected the idea of coming to work for large corporations,
Yeah.
because I just felt I had all these assumptions about, I would never fit in, I would never be able to operate within this hierarchical, rigid structure. And really, I'm completely shocked. Accenture is like a giant startup.
That's excellent. I mean, we were talking at the very beginning of this about scalability, and that's something that I've heard so often when looking into technology, and especially like workplaces. People always are saying like, that small company feeling is fantastic, but it's hard to scale. And so the fact that Accenture is able to maintain that is really impressive, because that's a thing that people often gets lost when companies get bigger. And so
Yeah, I mean, this is probably my last job, so I'm like super happy
that's awesome.
that
That's so great. Well, do you have any career, what's the best piece of career advice you have ever gotten? We'll maybe close on that one. The best piece of career advice you've ever gotten.
listening is really important. It's just, I can't stress how much confusion occurs in a short period of time because people aren't focused listeners. And it's even harder now because of multitasking. And
Right.
so, being present, I think, is already pretty difficult.
Yeah.
You might be nervous, or you're under pressure, or, you're being asked to do things you may not, know how to do perfectly. Um, Now we're kind of like, all of us are mentally in 3 or 4 places at once, right? Or 3 or 4 mediums of communication.
Mhm.
And so, the ability to just really be present and listening, I think is even, it's more and more important, especially I think at the beginning of your career, where, the trajectory of your success is going to be based on how well you understand what's expected of you.
Mhm.
And if you haven't been paying attention, you're not going to be able to execute.
I do that. Of course. Yeah. That's Be a
So
good listener.
it
Be good.
sounds obvious, but I think
But
it's
I think all advice is obvious, and it's when you like look
right.
into it as
Yeah,
like,
there's nothing mind blowing about that, but I think it's, we're all doing like living virtually, communicating virtually, collaborating virtually. It's more and more important to be able to focus.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much again for your engagement with us and helping students kind of prepare for their career destinations. This is concluding the episode within the series, Exploring Careers in Technology and New Frontiers. In closing, I would like to encourage viewers to tune in to get career perspectives and advice from a number of professionals in a broad variety of organizations in our other episodes in the series. I also want to encourage you to tune in to the other MIDDVantage series, which could be accessed through the events and programs tab on the CCI website. Thank you again for watching.